We continue chapter 303. Shin Gimel. This is page 615. Hemshech Ayin Beis Volume 1. As we said, we're in the middle of discourse number 74. So to sum up the context of where we're at is like this. After explaining, it's winding down two more chapters, the whole so-called section of Ir and Keli, Ayin and Yesh, the interface, how these two forces, which represent in existence, these two antithetical forces, one representing the source, called transcendence, Ayin, the other representing existence, Yesh, identity. So how does transcendence and existence meet? There's a long discussion of how they ultimately exchange personalities, how each assumes the other, features of the other, and how they ultimately join in one total fusion. Obviously, it's not as simple as that, and that's why there are all the different imbalances, possible dysfunctionalities, possible misalignments. So, as an antithesis to tikkun, where things work properly, is the world of Toyu, which is an archetype of a dysfunctional universe, where forces are very powerful. They have not yet come to peace with each other. As a result, there's the different misconfigurations of how Ir and Keli don't meet properly. And essentially, we're talking about four different types of imbalances, all four possibilities, where one is where they're both in two different worlds, transcendence is here, existence is here. They don't meet, like the wick does not meet the flame. This one is Ayin, this is Yesh. The second is the other extreme from the container's perspective, from existence perspective, that existence sublimates itself too much, to the point that it's like porous, like a porous wick. Okay. Okay. The third is the worst scenario, where the opposite extreme, where the transcendence is compromised, and it becomes too engaged and too trapped in the world of existence, so to speak. And finally, the fourth one gets by the first three, meaning you got through checkpoint number one, and there's a meeting. So the scholars, in other words, their connection that they have on their own, that from their own, they've met, but the formula is not perfect. The combination is right, not the mizug, as he says, the right mix. And this, of course, has many variations. That too much air, too much keli, and so you need that fourth one when they do meet. Now, he applied all of this in the last mimer, the last few chapters. All this was applied more into avodah, meaning more how it reflects in the soul and the body of a human being. Now, initially, the discussion was more, I would say, more theoretical, or you could say more the conceptually, as it is in the worlds of Tikkun Toyu. And the last few chapters, it's applied to soul and body, with the soul reflecting the ma, the body reflecting the ban, essentially the soul reflecting the energy and the body of the container. When I say body, means the animal soul, the natural soul, and how these two meet. So the purpose is, of course, that they join forces, but on their own, they're driven by different personalities. They have different drives. They have different interests, and as a result, they both have this conflict. So here too, there can be four different ways that it doesn't work, and then of course 4 ways that it does work. So he goes into a discussion, and this is where we're up to. We were in the middle of, we are in the process of understanding the first 2. So the first one is that the neshama um, is very much alive and inspired, but it does not it does not invite the body along for the ride, so to speak. And as such, as he explains, it's really a much more of an emotional experience as opposed to an internal one, a pneumistic one, the way it was meant to be. So the neshama has its inspiration, then it dissipates, and everything goes back, and the body goes to its desires, the soul having very little impact. The question is how real was even that inspiration, since it was only for the moment and temporary. But the bottom line is the 2 different worlds. And then there's, and I discussed that at length, the different ways that works, how tshuva works, how that works in prayer, in hisbonenus, and in general, how when a person has that type of compartmentalization. Of course, the tikkun for that is the way it's supposed to work, is that they join together, and there isn't an over excessive neshama experience as opposed to the body, or vice versa. They work together, and they both have their experience of the challenge. And the soul is not just running for its life, for survival, because it's disturbed and distressed by this world. But they both together deal with that distress with productive and constructive means, which is dealing with the challenges, recognizing the purpose of the challenge, intensifying their efforts, having pain over the difficulties, but each one in the proper way. So there's a balanced approach to the challenges of this world. Then there's the second dysfunction, the second imbalance, misalignment, and that is that the neshama, that the bit too much excessive bittul hayesh. We're talking about a person who has a personality that's like a weak heart, or a very impressionable person, but instead, so there's really no keli there. The keli breaks easily, or it's just very easily pliable, like the porous wick. So there you have instead of having a container that is personality, and the soul helps it grow, and help each other grow, you have too much bittul on that part of the existence, as opposed to being a strong existence that assimilates the concept of transcendence from the neshama. In the last chapter, we learned that both these things, both these forms of dysfunctional, is because they're not according to the kavan el yena. It's not the purpose. Purpose is that you have soul and body joined together. But the soul should illuminate the body, and together they should work together to illuminate the world. And in the last chapter that we just learned, it talks about how this is how this expresses itself in the avodah, first of all, in Torah and mitzvahs, which is the goal is to have a dominant neshama and a weakened animal desires and soul, but in a way that they work together, they don't annihilate each other. And mitzvahs, so Torah, as he said, strengthens the soul and weakens the animal. Mitzvahs connect the animal to the divine, each mitzvah in its own particular way. And same thing, davening, prayer through the meditation, contemplation, has to be a contemplation that is relevant and accessible and commensurate with the body and its natural way of thinking. It can't be about ideas that are beyond, that don't engage also the physical part of the person. And finally, also the tshuva has to be such, as he explained, the tshuva also has to be such that doesn't just have, I'm in pain or distress over something bad, but has to come with a calculation, with a determination, a resolution. What am I going to do to repair my ways? What's the strategy? It's not just, oh, I'm distressed by what happened, as you said earlier. And the same thing from the keli. That's from the perspective of the neshama. From the perspective of the container too has to have the receptivity to the soul. Stage one, but then it cannot allow itself to just give in and surrender, be overwhelmed. It has to allow, and he said that, so a person who may have that weaker personality, where there's a porous keli, there's a container existence that's not strong, the bittul has to be not a bittul that comes from you now, your natural subjugation. It has to come from respecting the soul causing you this bittul, the second level. In other words, you have to be receptive, but then the soul causes it, and that's when the containers actually remain strong. So the paradox becomes is that this container's existence helps transcendence be healthy, and transcendence helps existence be healthy. That they both can join in a proper combination in unity to serve. So now we continue chapter 303. Okay, Shingen. Page Tofresh Tazvav 515. V'hinei now atikum b'zeh be'emes u'momayla. Now in truth, the tikkun, the repair of this, comes from above. You recall that the main ingredient, besides the fact that the container and the energy on their own have embedded within them a receptivity to each other that they need to access. But what's the catalyst that makes it really work is their bittul, is their hanachas atzmuseh, is their dedication and commitment to the cause. Take that away, then left to their own tools and left on their own recourse, they will clash. They will not be able to join. So, like you spoke before with Ayin Keli, at the end of the day, they all have to do their part. But at the end, it comes down that they must have that ingredient in there. Like at the end of chapter 299, on page 606. So he says that. He says, that the tikkun of all the four is to shema, which is the bittul. That sense of, it's not about me, putting yourself aside. Shaloi is kifiteva ha'atzmus. That you should not be according to your essential nature or your essential desire, but it should be aligned to the higher purpose. Now it's critical to emphasize before we continue. This, you could say, if that's the case, what does it need all these pages and pages and pages of discussion? Just say, have hanachas atzmuseh, put yourself aside, have bittul to God and to the higher purpose, and everything will be fine. That's not sufficient, because remember, we want a dira b'tachtenu. We want an interface that works within existence. We don't want to annihilate existence. We're not just saying God created existence within a personality and an ego and a sense of self, and just put yourself aside and listen. Then there wouldn't be a relationship, as we've discussed many times. God wants, love me, know me, in your containers. And that's why there's a tzimtzum. There's a whole process, a whole cosmic order just for one purpose, that we should exist on our terms. If the point is to annihilate ourselves, so what do you need this whole system for? It's all about stepping stones to return to the form of integration. That's why you need this entire discussion to understand the components, the building blocks, the nature and the personality of existence, because the goal is within that Ayin Keli meet. So this bittul that we're talking about is not just some type of general, okay, just have bittul and that's it. Once is a container, and then energy. In other words, let's talk about the mediation, husband and wife, or two people. The mediator is not the one that's going to create peace. The mediator is simply bringing out the best in them and so-called weakening the worst in them. But they do have love for each other, or else there's no mediation. No one can create love. So when you have two people, two entities that don't get along, and the hope is that they should get along, the hope is two things here. Yes, a third party is going to help identify their commonality, but it's based on predicated on the fact that these two can get along. And after the mediation, they will forever work together. So Er and Keli on their own, in their own structure, have the capacity to communicate. The problem is we live in a complicated world. There's a lot of agendas. They have also elements in their personality that clash. So Toyu is a perfect example of an undisciplined world, not an evil world. It's a lot of great forces there, but there's no discipline. Tikkun is the model, the archetype of a disciplined world. So the forces are there, but now you need elements to make them work together. So what we've identified was, number one, that each one of them on their own has a certain element of response to the other. If you remember the discourse on level one, where the on its own recognizing the need to go to a container, closer to the container. Transcendence, understanding the need for existence. Existence on its own, the container, understanding the need to be receptive to the transcendence. And then comes the scholars number two that we discussed, that is not on their own, where they actually give each other. So the energy, transcendence teaches existence how to have even a higher level of transcendence. Bittul mitzvahs, not just bittul yesh. And existence teaches transcendence, how the higher purpose is ultimately for you to be here with me and join together in existence and experience transcendence, not to return to your source as you naturally will. And Hanakas Atzmitzvah bittul is that component, let's say the mediator is introducing something and saying, listen, guys, first let's both quiet down both your intense energy. Then let's find the commonality, and then you'll see how you really work together. So the bittul is not meant to be just a panacea, just a solution to all issues. Everybody just quiet down and just listen. It's meant to work within their structure. I think it's a very important qualification to understand how its role it plays, because at the end you'll say, well, if we need bittul anyway, what do we need? Oh, the whole introduction. So now we're going back. But so he says, meaning the true tikkun comes from above. They really can't do it completely on their own. Even though, he says, be'emes. What means be'emes? That there's tikkun even without the momaila. Meaning, they both can prepare the ground and prepare themselves, acclimate themselves to a deeper tikkun. But be'emes, it comes from momaila. You can see from the ways he's collectively now referring to chapters, not just one chapter, like from chapter 263 and on. You're talking now almost 40 chapters ago. So he says, so just like in the repair of the energy in the container that we discussed earlier, beginning from chapter Reish Samar Gimel. Let's see, Reish Samar Gimel Ve'elach. What's Reish Samar Gimel? What happened there? Yeah, okay. We started the whole thing that the whole tikkun comes from Shema. After the entire discussion about Toyu and the need to have tolerance from the Urs, and as Kalim creates interconnectivity scholars, so they started Reish Samar Gimel, the whole discussion of Shema. First they started with the Metzach, and then moved from there into Urs and Kalim that we've been learning now from chapter 292, 279. So 263 is a watershed chapter, so to speak, a key beginning, and so is 279. And now he's tying it up. So like we explained it, so just like by the repair of the energy in the container that we discussed starting from from chapter 263 and on, Shatikan and Mamayla, that the repair comes from above. That causes, or that affects the bittul and the oir the this subjugation, I guess, the suspension of self and the energy, that it should be in a state of descent. So that's the level of hanochas atzmui, that it puts itself aside. Hanuteva atzmei, which means it puts aside its essential nature, liyas hepach tiva, in order for it to be opposite of its nature. Because as we discussed at length, air on its own is always rising. It's always looking to go back to its source, always connected. That's transcendence by its nature. So the fact that transcendence recognizes a need to descend into existence is not coming from its essential nature. It's not annihilating its nature. That's the whole point. But it fundamentally comes from a sense of state of putting itself and its nature aside. And the same thing on the container level. The same thing in the container, that should have the bittul, it should have its surrender, its subjugation, its suspension of self, that it should be a container to receive, because the container on its own could just be self-contained and remain where it is and not move anywhere and not be receptive to anything. So Kamoy Kain, since the whole thing is being compared to Air and Keli, to Neshama and Guf, Kamoy Kain, Hu b'Neshama v'Guf. The same thing is with the soul and the body. That it comes from above. This thing that the neshama should go from ayin to yesh, from a state of transcendence to a state of existence, is something that's from above. That it should go from ayin to yesh to have a relationship and a connection to the body. And the same thing the other way around. Bittul, and that the body should have its suspension of self to become a container to the earth, to the light and energy of the soul. It says in the parentheses, like we learned earlier in chapter 294, that we learned before, that the bittul of the container is fundamentally really only bittul hayesh, not bittul mitzias. Why is he adding this here? I guess he's trying to explain that it's still within the parameters of the container. Okay. Yeah, because it's tying together, because he's saying that the bittul mitzias, that transcendence, infuses in the keli, is not the keli on its own. This bittul keli, is be'etzem uhusa, but it comes from umayl. Okay. Now, parentheses, he adds. How long is this parentheses? It goes quite a few lines, I see. All the way. Okay, it's a good 15 lines, huh? 15 lines, fine. So there's a long parenthesis now, another one. Even though we just said that's coming from above, nevertheless, we can generate this bittul that coming from above through our efforts, through effort. He doesn't say our effort, but I'm just explaining. Aidei shtadlus means through effort. Because you could say above, so you need grace, you need a gift, you need God to be merciful, and that you should get this blessing. Say no, aidei shtadlus, meaning we can generate, which means again it comes through our avodah, which means it comes on our terms as well. And that's the effort. That there should be the, how do you translate hisaskus? It means immersion. Hisaskus means the effort. Shtadlus is effort. Hisaskus is when, like Asik means involvement, immersion, investment.
Occupation.
But Saskus is like a real involvement. The with a more of with more patience. Yashvus is more than just patience. It's settling in. It means not doing it rushed. Where you really contemplate. You do it very, very. This is the word I want to use. Deliberately. With excessive, with the additional internalization. And with an expansion in the details. Like he spoke earlier, to say one thing, for example, the soul feels distress in this world, or a person feels inspiration, as long as it remains general, it doesn't become internalized and integrated. So what we can do when we have, let's say, this neshama is awakening, so the whole purpose, remember he says, is you have to translate that into a cheshbon. Don't just let the inspiration come and go. Turn it into a resolution. You're inspired, sit down and figure out how this inspiration turns into a strategy for the future. Sustain it, or else it won't be sustainable. So that is definitely up to us. What he's saying, therefore, is that this bittul, this hanachos atzmuse, can be. The expression is it doesn't say it replaces it. It means that you can cause it to be through our efforts, and that's through our efforts of, as I said, through immersion, a commitment, involvement, that it should be more settled, more internalized, and more expansive in the details. Another way, and also through making sure that these inyanim, these ideas that are, these inspirations, are manifest in a hasagi yeser, in more in understanding. Again, it's not just some fleeting experience, but you integrate it into your mind, and that it should be dressed up in the garments of understanding. So it's a contemplation on it. You know, very often when someone, let's say, has an inspiration, the reason it dissipates is because it was like a fleeting moment. Why? Because it happened. You witnessed it, but it wasn't you. To own it, you have to contemplate on it and say, what did I just see? And what does it mean for me? And what do I do with it? And how do I act on it? So he's saying these are all examples. This is shtadlus. There's examples of how we generate and we bring this experience into our beings. And this will be, and this happens in a form of Kabbalah sale. Kabbalah sale, of course, means you're submitting yourself. So, it's a back and forth thing. On one hand, he's talking about bittul. On the other hand, he's talking about integrating it. But he's now going back and saying, this is a form of Kabbalah sale, which means to accept the yoke. Im ki kosha lav hadavar b'yeser, even though it's very difficult for him, nevertheless, he imposes upon himself. He forces himself. Let me read on to see exactly where he's going with this. Because for a soul like this, for a soul like the one described in chapter 301, the Medreg Aleph, in the first level of the soul. So he said there, the soul is a very alive type of soul. I'm just looking it up. The truth is, he mentioned this type of soul at the bottom of page 609. Madrigal Yenim Chizma. He's now referring it to chapter 301, the first level of the soul. I guess he's referring to, because he says there the two different dysfunctionalities. The first one is the soul is very much alive, but it doesn't carry it doesn't bring the body along. The second one is a person who's very weak. So maybe that's what he's referring to, Be'ef and Aleph. Even though, as I said, in chapter 300, he does talk about higher neshamas of Ma, which are stronger in their energy. They get very inspired. It doesn't affect the body. Okay. Bottom line is, he's talking about a neshama that is a flame, that is a blaze. So he's saying like this: neshama kazuda, like the neshama that we learned before in chapter 301, Madrega Aleph, in the first level of dysfunctionality, basically. Kovet hadover lisasik binyanim muchim. Ah, that's what he's saying. Okay, my mistake. My mistake. I didn't clarify properly. When he's saying like this, okay, remember in this parenthesis he's saying how also this bittul also comes through our efforts. How? Through applying yourself, internalizing it, expanding on the ideas in detail, and making sure it's comprehended properly in a way of understanding. He's talking about the soul. So he says, Zayir b'derech kabbalah sel. And this will be, because why would the soul do this? Why would the neshama make such an effort? On its own, it's very difficult, like he says, because a soul like this, it's very difficult for a soul like this to get involved, immersed in such so-called, he calls it lowly, but I guess inferior matters. Well, the Belavushi Hasaga and in the garments of comprehension, Kim Binyanim Nailam B'chinas Havshata. Because the soul is primarily interested in lofty things and of an abstract form. He's basically saying something he said earlier, that the neshama on its own, he was talking about these bonus in the previous chapter, he was talking about middle of the page, he said that it gets very excited and very emotional, but it has to, what was the word we used? It's calm itself down. It has to be calmed down. It has to be quieted. So he's going back, he's referring to that. So the soul on its own needs Kabbalah Sel for this. Because on its own, it's very difficult for it to, when you get excited about something, to say, 1 second, let's dissect this. Let it cool down. It's really unnatural to do that. However, it has to force itself. Rather, it has to force itself in a form of Kabbalah Sel. It just accepts that's what it has to do. And with this, it acquires a kinyan b'nafshe. How do you explain it? It acquires, it's like a new feature in the soul. Kinyan b'nafshe means that when you do something with a disciplined way long enough, you begin to own it. Kinyan means literally an acquisition. You kind something, you purchase something. It becomes yours. That's what kinyan is. Kinyan is a symbol of a transfer of property, a transfer of anything that moves from one entity to another, from one property to another, from one owner to another. So how do you own this? So he says, this Kabbalah Sel, where the soul makes the effort against its natural inclination to just expire in inspiration. So it becomes very nasa, and this causes kinyan b'nafshi. It should own it. The nafesh should own liyas b'chinas yisasrus b'kli. That it should become containable. That it should be settled in the container. It shouldn't be all restless. It should have that peace, where it's in harmony with itself and with the container. And its work, its efforts, the soul's efforts, should have a relationship, should have a connection to the body and the natural soul. That's from the soul's perspective. So he's basically just explaining a little more, even though you could have implied it, but there's more details here that were not said. That even though the bittul, the hanochsatz musay, is so to speak coming mamayla, but there's something that has to be done lamata. In other words, God can't just impose bittul and say, here's a gift. If the soul will not have this type of discipline, It won't help the Hanachas Atzmusay that this is, let's say, you sent us. It's similar to Shavuos. In order to reach the 50th and get the Torah, which comes from above, we can't do it on our own. You need 49 days to prepare the container. Why didn't God just give the mountain Torah right after Pesach? Because he could have given it, but we wouldn't have contained it. It wouldn't have lasted with us. It would have been like imposing something on someone without really them prepared to receive it. So essentially, what the neshama has to do it has to do its efforts through Kabbalah sale, and then once it does it, it becomes a kinyan b'nafshe. It becomes something it actually owns, which of course requires more explanation. Does it mean that the soul loses its transcendent qualities? Absolutely not. Soul always wants to reach upward, and that's our gift. You never want the soul to become like in option 3, too immersed. You want it always to remain restless. But I would say it's the difference between healthy angst and unhealthy anxiety. When a human being has healthy angst, a sense of restlessness, that does not disrupt their lives, does not destroy their lives, but keeps them awake, keeps them aware, keeps you like searching, yearning, that's very healthy. What the kinyan nafshi is that the soul's perspective, it doesn't become so restless that it gets disturbed by and is constantly overwhelmed by the bodily needs and so on. That's what he says with the work, with the Kabbalah sale. And work, the soul can come to a place of peace. But not entire peace. We're not talking about animal bliss here. We're not talking about the soul becoming the body. Is that the soul is at peace with the body and realizes the purpose, it realizes it has to work with the body. It's a maturity, like Rabbi gained after the 13th year, where your goal is to fix, not just to destroy, not just to reject, not just to be repelled. It's like the story with the Alter Rebbe where they said the 2 levels. To whip the horse until it stops being a horse, or until it knows it's a horse. In other words, the point of the matter is not to annihilate, but to be. So there's a sashvus in this, that it comes to peace with it. The tiavidose and its work should be with the guf and nefesh hativis, and it still maintains its oyer quality. Now, obviously, this is the whole balance of existence, of life. But he's giving us the formula that this is very doable. Now, from the perspective of the container, from the body and the nefesh. What is its effort? Remember, he said it's mamayla, but now it's coming from what is its effort? Lishvir hayesha, to break its arrogance. Yeshus is more than arrogance. Yeshus is its sense of self, its self-contained sense of identity, me, existence. Bittul Again, he referred. This is things that he already discussed earlier, but he's summing it up. He's explaining it, which is that emptying yourself. The klei, I'm here. I'm receptive. Before davening, I set aside my desires. I set aside my distractions, which is like shutting off your cell phone on a very basic level, but also emotionally creating the space to receive something more than yourself. That's what the container has to do. And that's through the bitushim, through the rebukes, where you basically, this is not to be confused with self-flagellation or self-annihilation. It's where you reprimand yourself. Like it says in Tanya, that you raise your voice and you yell at it, bekel rash, with a loud voice, v'reges, and anger, and all other ways to break and reprimand and rebuke your body and its desires. Now, again, it's critical to point out, we're not talking here about low self-esteem. We're not talking about reprimanding yourself, guilt that demoralizes. We're talking about when a desire that is opposite of the divine, of spirituality, comes your way. Sometimes the way to do it is just simply to rebuke it, to say, I don't want to be involved in dirt. It would be like, if you're just going to be passive, the desire is strong. So you have to, desire has passion, you have to equalize it with your passion by saying, I don't want to be contaminated. So it'll be like a friend coming, inviting you to do something that is really not right. And he says, come, come, come. And you say, no, I don't want. Then somebody keeps saying, come. You say to them, no, get out of my house. I don't want to be involved in something like that. So it's not an anger that's coming from an uncontrollable place, or it's coming from a kedusha place where you actually repulsed by, and you express it in real reprimand. And again, this is not about demoralizing and breaking in a negative way. It's about weakening. And in time, just like he said before about kinyan benafshe, that if the soul does this involvement of immersing itself, engaging with the body in understanding, it becomes something it owns. Here too, meshach hazman, with time, nishbar yeshuse. This approach of vigilance, not passivity, you ultimately break the yeshus. ובאופן הבייז, שהוא בכינס ביטל ושיפלס עתיקה, now, that he's talking about, that was level 1. That was the repair of dysfunctional level 1. Well, what's going on level 1? We said the Ayin Yesh, transcendence and existence, are on 2 different worlds. How do we come together? Hanochas Atzmuse, they both put themselves aside. But here he's talking about their efforts. So the effort of the soul is to immerse itself, engage, involve itself with the body and refining it. And the effort on the body's part and the natural soul is to break its yeshus through bitushim, through reprimanding itself. Well, what about in the second way of dysfunctionality? What should the body do there? We're talking about there, that was too much bittul. We talked about, remember that that's the case of shiflus, where you have low self-esteem and too much bittul. Person who's weak-hearted, weak-spirited. I'm sorry. There the repair is the opposite. In the first one, to be a container to the soul, and you're in your own yeshus and your own self, you have to break those desires, that involvement in the material. Here, you need to strengthen the person, because they're suffering from low self-esteem. They're suffering from a weakened spirit. They're too porous. So what's the approach here? Is the sameach nafshi be'esek hatera, is to celebrate. How do you say the sameach somebody? To make them joyous.
Delight is all.
To delight. Cause them to celebrate. Cause them to be happy. Be'esek hatera. In the study and the immersion in Torah. V'hu sheisasiv binyanim anaylim b'madreges ein sof. And that's through immersing yourself in very lofty and sublime levels of ein sof. That delights and that intensifies or strengthens, empowers this the nefesh. And to create an expansion of the containers through Torah and mitzvahs. Very interesting. This is absolutely adding something new here. Because he said earlier, yeah. Okay, so it's interesting. Basically, it comes down to almost two opposite approaches. If the keli is too much yesh, you have to break the yesh for it to be receptive to the transcendence of existence. If existence is too weak, you need to empower it. Because remember, the breaking of it in the first method is again not demoralization. It's critical to say this all the time, because many of us today, people have been very much hurt and identify religion and its dogma and its authority with breaking people, punishment, guilt. You know, there are people, even in the most frum homes. I mean, you have an attitude of a lot of guilt. And Tanya makes it very clear: any guilt, any negative feelings that lead to demoralization, is atzvus. What's atzvus? Atzvus means a broken spirit. Atzvus is depression. It means it doesn't motivate you to do anything. So it can't be coming from Kedusha. Merirus, on the other hand, as he explains in Tanya, is a sense of something greater, and it motivates you. So the Even HaBeichen, the litmus test, is very simple. What does it do for a person? I remember hearing this many times from the Rebbe. So you meet somebody in the street, and you see they did something wrong. You start telling them that they're going to burn in Gehenna, or they're going to get this punishment, that punishment. What's the Even HaBeichen? What's the result? Let's say everything you said is true. If the person is not motivated to do anything, what's the point? Why'd you do that? You didn't get anywhere. You said what's true, but it doesn't have any effect. If you tell him, on the other hand, you have such a beautiful neshama, has such great potential. He feels, and you say it sincerely, he feels that you believe in it. And then he senses, wow, based on the neshama, what you're capable of, you're not really reaching that place. Someone cares about you and it motivates, then you see the effect. We're not talking about ignoring something negative. We're talking about how do you address the negative. So with a person that's strong, like in case one, with the body and the guf nefesh, the containers are very much intact, then the challenge is how do you get them to be sublimated and receptive to transcendence, to something greater. But with someone who's weak, to go take advantage of that and now say, you know what, the Torah tells you this, tells you that, breaking that person, it's like the stories with the Magidim that the Baal Shem Tov would say, have Rachmanis on the Id. So the point of reprimanding someone that's already a weak spirit, and I see this, this is very good, this is a model even for today. I know people, who started coming closer to Yiddishkeit, and some of them are very strong people, and they need the other extreme, also done with love. But there the challenge is how do you break the yeshes, so to speak. But there are people who have been broken by life and broken spirits in general. And then to just break them further with Yiddishkeit, you're not doing that. What are you doing? Taking advantage by saying, oh, they're already broken. That's why they embrace Yiddishkeit, because they're broken spirit, because they have no will of their own. Or they're very easily, as he said, very easily impressionable.
Explain
Or people who, for example, grew up in homes where there was no love, no nurturing. So Yiddishkeit and Torah, Jews from communities, provided, so to speak, this nurturing. And then, of course, there's after the honeymoon, and you wake up, you see it's not so great. Not so perfect. The challenge is how do you want a person to own it and to strengthen them. It's not just enough to get a person who didn't keep Yiddishkeit to suddenly keep Yiddishkeit. That's nice, and it has to be a way that person owns it, that person is becoming a better and stronger person. If it's just exactly exploitation of a weakness, so yeah, good, whatever it may be, but you're not achieving the real goal. And that's a very critical point. I think this can be applied in many ways, simply as a model. So what do you do with a person like that? You have to give them strength, empower them. What do you empower them? To tell them that they're bad people? No, teach them. And teach them the most lofty things. Why does he say lofty? Why not just teach them Torah? Torah is beautiful. the seichel of Torah. Because it could be the lofty things really elevate you. You could see that, you take a person who's very low about himself and bring him into Gan Eden, to the highest places of Chassidus, and learn deep things, that vote of confidence. You're capable of it, and it has a deeper pleasure than just learning something like that. You say a person like that feels such a low self-esteem. Okay, I'm not really capable of learning the highest matters. And I'm not saying that's the reason, but Derech Chefshe, maybe that's why he says being on an island. Because then it also elevates the person to that place. Because if you remember, actually before by the neshama, he said the neshama shouldn't. And it's natural, the neshama is an inyanim nayim. The neshama goes to lofty things, very abstract, not interested in mercy. Here he's saying the opposite, that the neshama, the body, should be taught these lofty things. Now for the body, that is great. For the neshama to do that, it separates it from existence. But for existence to do that, it elevates existence. So just that line is I think, unbelievable approach. So it's like teaching people not just do this, do that, God wants. You see someone who's weak, you know what you should do? Empower him. Teach him the deepest concepts, the highest ideas, and delight him, give him joy, bring him joy, simcha, and strengthen his soul. They call it in psychology. There's the concept of a cognitive therapy or cognitive life raft. is an expression I've seen, where sometimes when a person emotionally is not able to enter somewhere out of fear, or I mean, this is a real situation where sometimes a person has been hurt, so you can't just say come, just immerse because they're afraid. They've been hurt in that situation. So one of the ways to go is called a cognitive life raft. It's similar to, I mean, it's pure chassidus, really. It's take them there, let them imagine. Let's not go there. Let's just, with our minds, imagine you're going to swim. You're not swimming. You're afraid to swim because he saw someone drown, God forbid, or he once had a dangerous situation. So you take somebody and you take them like almost on an imaginary journey, because the mind is safer. The mind, I'm just thinking about it, but it can prepare you to later actually, because it makes emotion. It's like a child who's afraid to come out from under a table or because whatever, thinks there's a monster. So you could schlep your child out and say, there's no monster, or you could say, you could play along and tell the child, the monster's walked out. You created a cognitive map, a cognitive image where it's less dangerous, the more safer environment. And then, the child will peek out to see is it true or not true, stuff like that. That would be the way to do it. To say the monster just left. I'm giving a stupid childish example. But then what you're doing is let the child with its mind imagine, and then comes out, and then it will learn one day. To break the child and say, no, there's no monster, but don't be immature, what are you talking about? Even if you're successful, you did it out of fear. You didn't let the person really come to it. You want them to emotionally be courageous enough. So I'm just using it as an example. So sometimes when a person is demoralized like that, they need confidence. And recognizing that, even though you may say to yourself, 1 second, if I was in that situation, I wouldn't have these fears. So you say, what are you being so stupid? Stop being so low self-esteem. But a person who's at low self-esteem has low self-esteem. There's a reason for it. You can't just dismiss it and say, it's ridiculous. It's not. We all have our mishigasim. Now, obviously, there are times where a person is being ridiculous. If you could influence them, fine. But sometimes you see it's deep. You see there's real resistance. It's not so simple. So the approach is, do something. Leave the issue alone. Don't address that with them. You don't go attack the weakest point. You bring them up. You lift them up to another place. You learn something, and they get stronger. So this is like another way of explaining why you learn these deeper things in Chassidus, even Ayin Beis itself. Not saying the Rabbi Rashab is suggesting, but maybe. And that in Yonam Anal Madrigish Alien Sof is Ayin Beis. It doesn't get deeper than this. So that alone is Mesameach or Magbis HaNefesh. It doesn't even mean you have to understand it all. The point is that you're immersed in it. You lift it on its wings to a greater place. Velasis is Sachras HaKelim Adei Terim Mitzvahs. And to Terim Mitzvahs, you actually expand the containers, then they become stronger. As they become stronger, obviously they are receptive to much more. So all this is in this parentheses about the ishtadlus, the effort of what the neshama and guf have to do in order to create this fusion between them. So again, it's a constant dance. Is it coming from above or is it coming from them? As we said, the interface, it has to be both. It's a little from above and a little from below. Like I said before, if Matan Torah happened right after Pesach, you're lacking interface because we're not containers. If we counted and we counted day 50, then you're lacking a little more divine. So it goes together. We count the 49, and then the 50th manifests. You always find this type of like, well, God couldn't rest in the Mishkan without us. Can't find His presence here. Obviously He could, but then it wouldn't be us. It wouldn't be within us. So we have to show up. And this is you create the container. Right, exactly. And then you get in return. Mekadosh Atzmei Lamata is Metayr Atzmei At Lamata is Metayr Nesa. Both time Asay Nesa, but also Mekadosh Atzmei At Lamata and Mekadosh Nesa Habim Umayel. B'chol Moitcha, Chassidus says, when we say B'chol L'Shem L'Kacha B'chol Vav B'chol Moit. What's Moitcha? It's all your might. But Moitcha, your might is relevant is relative to what you have when you're not so mighty. So if a little more effort than your regular, that's your moed. My moed may be different. Your moed tomorrow may be different than it is today. So Chassidus says when you do your ma'id, you go a little out of more than you can, you get the ma'id, the amiti, the real ma'id, because it's all commensurate. God says you did a little more, so you get that. You can say, 1 second, this person's ma'id is nothing compared to someone. It's for someone else. That's not even an effort. It doesn't matter. For you, it was. Like, what is the story with Zusha? Yeah, that he's crying why he's not Zusha, not why. You know. So, okay, that's the parentheses. So now he goes back to before the parentheses, which let me just go ahead because bittul matl ma'alis. I guess. Well, as I said, this is remember we're talking about the 4 levels of dysfunctional stuff. So there's, as we said, there's the first 2, which is what he's addressing here. He's now immersed in these 2. One where the ayin, the existence, I think transcend. I haven't used this before in previous classes, but I think it's a good way to. I've been writing, so when you write, some new words emerge. So, and I was defining Oyer as being transcendence, and Yesh Keli being Mitzias, existence. And it's where transcendence meets existence, which is really the key thing here. I think transcendence is a great word to capture what the Oyer's personality. It's transcendent, it's always transcendent. It's always looking upward. And Keli is identity, it's existence. And God wants these 2 to meet. So we've been talking about where one is existence, is transcendence is ayin is here, existence is here. Then we've talked where how to repair that. Then we're talking about where the existence is too transcendent, too sublimated, it's too porous. And we just talked about that as well. Now he's saying b'chlal zeh, this fusion of these 2 is gam sheneshama gufi be'erech zel zeh. So in other words, not just that they should each reach toward the other, but they should also be commensurate, proportionate to one another. And that the neshama was on a exalted, a very high level in the ayin eliki, in the transcendent divine. And nevertheless, it still has in it the soul that it should have that feature that it goes from ayin to yesh. Neshim laguf gas yeser. One second, how do we read this? Okay, so he's explaining how it is proportionate. Yeah.
Sort of existence.
So the shaman, which is on a very high transcendent level, nevertheless has mind the yesh. Neshim law, they give this soul a very crass body, a very gas, a very grubber body. Shubchin is yesh yeser, more than just regular yesh. It's an excessive yesh, excessive existential entity. Ach yesh bebchin bittul hayesh. However, it has within it bittul hayesh. In other words, it
has the potential for bittul hayesh.
Well, let's see where he's going. I'm not really sure yet. And because of the quality of the soul being so transcendent, it has the power to repair this crass body. The neshama shenafla b'yesed. I'm sorry, neshama shvela. When neshama shvela b'yesed, neshama that's lower soul, it's much lower soul. Shebchins ayin sheba b'chins miyatair. Its transcendence is much more diminished. Is a diminished light. That's what he's saying. That's the proportion. Okay. So it necessitates that it would be given, this type of soul would be given a much more refined and clean, pure.
Because he doesn't have the tools to.
He
doesn't have the tools.
How would you read that? Is it b'chinas ma? Or masha b'neshama lahapach? How would you read what's the ma?
The ma is the bittul. The tools. That are the tools that the neshama uses to.
No, or masha b'neshama.
the master neshama is able to.
Right, okay. Interesting, the Neshama has the letters Ma in it. I didn't realize that. Like Chochmah, Neshama. Ah.
That is what the component of the neshama.
I'm not saying, I just noticed that. Because it's saying Mashem Neshama. Because we said before, Neshama B'chal is Ma, the Guf is Ba.
You just said
okay.
Before.
Yeah. So here goes like this. So what he's saying like this, he's adding now like this. That in B'chal Zed, they're joining, is also they should be relevant. So he's explaining what that means. That means, an Neshama should be great, the Neshama that's a greater Neshama in transcendence. See, the Makol Mokum threw me a little, because it's really like a parenthesis. What's the Makol Mokum Yesh B'B'chinas Ma'ayin Liyesh? And it's qualifying, because he wants to say, even though it's very ayin, it still has no this. So such a neshama, it's a parenthesis. It should be like a comma. For who's a neshama she gave B'Chinas Ayin Alaki, comma. Makol Mokum Yesh B'B'chinas, Neisnim La, that's the Esfer. So you give such a high neshama, you give it a very crass body.
Right.
And that too is comma. And it has bittul, yes, because again, if you're saying it's very high neshama and very crass, then we're two different worlds. So that's why he has to qualify. Both of them on their own are reaching toward each other, or else you don't have a meeting point. But once it's working well, they both do reach. Because remember, a high neshama can say, I don't want a body altogether, let alone a very crass body. That was what he said before, the neshama, where it just gets selfish or completely dedicated to its own thing and doesn't want to go there. So we're talking about that they both are going towards each other. But once they do, it's in a way that now it has Mitzad Ma'as Neshama, because of its strength, it has the power to sublimate, to refine even this type of grubba body, crass body. But a lower neshama, which ayin, its transcendence is weaker, less diminished light, there you must give it a weaker body. You can't give it such a yesh. It has to be a more refined and more subtle, sublime body. So the soul should have the power with its bittul to transform darkness to light. If you gave such a refined soul an excessively crass body, and since this neshama is not so ayin, it has more, so to speak, it has also more, yes, it, God forbid, it can fall in the ultimate fall, ultimate descent. Because the energy of ma, of this knowl, is mitzumtzum, is very diminished. He's saying two things. In other words, the air itself is weaker, and kolshke even more so when this neshama is becoming too much of a yesh. And this very grubber and thick and crass body is going to will draw the chavis to extinguish,
whatever light
completely extinguish his light entirely, God forbid.
But it's ACS.
This is already the third level of dysfunctionality, actually, what he just said now.
No, it's ACS, they need explanation, because what does the guf dak mean? I mean, we're talking about the guf, we're not talking about the neshama.
Okay, fine. Let's finish, and then we'll go back. Oh, there he says, V'zeu hamadrega gimel, and this is the third dysfunctional imbalance. Shanashama shvela v'guf shuffle. The soul is lower. In other words, high, relatively speaking. V'guf shuffle, and the body is low.
Low means more
crass, yeah, more yesh. ובפרט כשיש תרתי לריוסה. One second, he said that expression before. Tati liriusa. Where did he use that?
It's a halachic expression.
I know, but he said it earlier. Where they both, in the third thing, he said it. They both contribute. Tati liriusa is like partners in crime. What is it in halacha used? Rayusa is friendship. It's like a partnership.
No, Rayusa means
Ilera.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. So it's partners in crime. What is it used in halacha?
If you have a Rayusa, the mashal that one is something's not a ben yamin, then you have another Rayusa that it's also.
Okay. That's how it's used. Okay, two
things that are one on top of the other.
That's how it's used. Okay, right. Okay. He used it before. The bottom line is it's more than the sum of the parts. That's what happens. It's like two. It's partners in crime for all practical purposes. Talta Reusa. And Shigama Neshama he b'chinas yesh. So it's not just the body, but also the Shama is now b'chinas yesh. Remember, I'll explain this in a moment, but let me just finish. Let's just finish. Parentheses. V'hein kamei achshav is man ikvus Mashiach. And that's like now, in the times of ikvus Mashiach, the footsteps of Mashiach, or the heel of Mashiach, meaning the end of days. The neshama shvel is b'miyut hayeser achra, b'chinas ma. That the neshamas in this generation, and I'll explain this also, are their lowest, the ultimate, the b'miyut hayeser achra, the absolute lowest of all, b'chinas ma, in their bittul. Ve'ein the neshama gam b'roshei hadeir. Ma v'ayin, I'm sorry. So how's it go? Says b'miyut hayeser achra, b'chinas ma v'ayin.
No, vein.
The ain the neshama?
Yeah.
The ayin the neshama, it sounds like. Oh no, it goes like this.
Yes.
Shavuos b'miyut hayeser achra, b'chinas ma v'ayin the neshama gam b'roshei hadeir. That it's the ultimate lowest. It's the lowest point. The lowest, the greatest diminishment in the ma, the bittul, and the transcendence of the neshama, even in the neshamas of the leaders of the generation. Wow. V'gam agufim rechekim b'yeser, yeser. V'gam agufim rechekim yeser min habittul la'ayin b'deres hadeshenim. And also the bodies in this generation are more distant from the bittul ayin, from the sublimation and the transcendence that wasn't earlier in the early generation. So the early generation. Because in the early generations, they would return to tshuva with a broken spirit. The ma'at, hisedus mamayla, with a little awakening from above. Mashenken achshev. However, today, on the other hand, today, it does not help so much that you say this awakening from above. Till the point that we could be considered like we're asleep in the ground, like dead, basically. Oh, this is strong stuff here. Okay, let's just finish the paragraph and then I'll explain. The Indian yeshus and neshamas v'yeshus haguf sheyochel leherit chas v'shalom. Now this thing, the yeshus and neshamas, the coarseness, crassness. Let's not call it crass. Yeshus here is more than that. It's not gas. No. Yeshus is the existentialism of the neshamas, of the souls, and the yeshus haguf and the body. Sheyochel leherit chas v'shalom, that can cause it to descend, God forbid. Yesh lemer ba'aveda hu kamoi ava v'yira b'murgish b'yeser shalei b'chinas bittul. What is it we can say in Aveda? What is this? It's ava v'yira, love and awe, that's very much felt.
Tangible.
Very tangible. Shalei b'chinas bittul. Murgish b'yeser is not just that's tangible, like he said before, it means you sense yourself. It's like Ru'ah, he said. I sense myself as, I have love. It's a yesh in it. That's not in the form of humility or sublimation. Well, that's a long way back. I just want to see what he says there. Oh, like potatoes. Okay.
I was talking about the discovery, so the Yitzhahara should go down lower and lower.
Sheyachal lipol chas v'shalom bara acharad tefillah shehelel binyan he'elam. That makes it possible for it to fall, God forbid, in evil after davening, when he goes off to his worldly matters. I was out to work. What's the life? In the tikkun of the third dysfunctional, that should be a bittul. There should be a sublimation, both from the perspective of the soul and from the perspective of the body. How does that help? They also help. The tikkun below our Aveda is through bittul. They shouldn't have such yeshus. And the tikkun mamayla, remember he's talking also what happens from above, is that when you're in that type of state where the body, the soul is diminished, transcendence, you give him not a grub, not a crass body, but a more refined one, in order that he should be able to do the service appropriately. Okay. Let's explain this now. A few things I want to say. Just a few things I want to say. He's definitely throwing into the equation here some new information. That's what I'm just thinking about. How to, because he didn't speak in Eris and Keli. See, there's two parts of this whole discussion. There's Er and Keli and how it's in Toyo, Tikkun. There's Neshama and Guf. And Er and Keli didn't really talk this element. That the Er and Keli, the Er is given a Eidla Keli or not. So he's added a new dimension. That's why I'm just trying to adjust my coordinates. He's throwing in a new element, which is obvious because in Eris and Kalim, it's not like there's some Kalim that are more grub than others. Maybe there are, but it doesn't discuss it. Whereas here it has that new dimension. So I think what he's saying like this. Remember, it's all in context. This chapter, it'd be interesting to see how this chapter was written. Because the Rebbe Rashab wrote almost three Maduras, Ayin Beis. He wrote the whole Hemshech, the flow, but it's only half of the Hemshech. I just found out that almost double was written on the second time when he went over again after he wrote the beginnings and ends and added the chapters. He added at least double. That means if you read the first Madura, you'd have half the size. It'd be interesting to see what the flow was originally.
He added to the goof to the panim.
Yeah, a tremendous amount. I think almost more than double. Because when you look at how many pages was the first, it's half. The second is more double the amount of pages. Double. I don't know exactly. I didn't really measure it, but it's a lot. So it'd just be interesting how it was like in its first version, and then see what he added to it. But that's another study. I'm guaranteed that in this chapter there's additions, because I could see if you're really reading the flow, you could sense, certain additional things that he didn't say before, and there's certain things that he did say before. So I'm sure this chapter had things that were very consistent, and the fact that he added chapter numbers it later tells you right away some things that he added when he added the new chapters, because he went over it again, the Rebbe Rashab. So when he went over it again, he added connections that weren't there before. Okay, I'm just mentioning that as an aside. But what I sense here is that now that the final product, so to speak, what we see now. So the commonality to the previous chapters is relatively smooth. Just like there's 4 levels of dysfunctionality, Er and Keli, there's 4 in Neshama and Guf. So far, I've gone through 3 of them. Maybe the 4th one a little hinted to, but point being that you can have the Ayin, the transcendence, and the existence. Fine. And we talked about how that's repaired. That's Anachas Atzmoseh. You have where the bittul, the guf, is too porous, too bottle, like he spoke to low self-esteem, very weak or non-existent containers. And there he spoke, and where there the containers have to get stronger. In the previous chapter, he said the neshama makes it get stronger. Here he said that one of the ways is through simcha, through the simcha of learning, of elevating it, making it stronger and expanding its containers. It also needs bittul, the second, because you always need hanochas atzmoseh. You need to not just be yourself. If you go according to your own nature, you're off to trouble. So you need to be there, but you need to also submit to that bittul. That I explained before is not annihilation. That's why we have all these chapters, because it's about the Er and Keli being themselves, but allowing into their existence that putting themselves aside for the higher purpose. Okay. And that comes Momaila. That's Momaila. But there are efforts you can do to draw that down. In the following up the Momaila, that's where he goes into, because if you notice, he said Ubechlal Zeh is that the Sham and Guf should be relative to each other. And then he says that also comes Momaila. You give it. Who decides? So the new dimension he's adding here is that commensurate to the level and intensity of the bittul, of the transcendence of the soul, will be given a body. That's decided by God, not by us. That's not through Avodah. Through Avodah, you can create your own bittul, you can work in yourself. But something what God does is makes it a little easier. By giving a weaker soul, he'll give a weaker challenges. And a greater soul, it may give a greater challenge. So what's a guf gas and what's a guf dak? That's a good question. I would say on a very basic level, and I'm now calling upon certain memorim that I've learned. I don't remember now exactly where. I would have to look it up. It would be great, I think, in the research of this chapter to find other places that talk about guf dak, guf gas. But surely there is. It's for sure from the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe Rashab also. Just don't call up. But I would say, the most basic level is you have some people that are physically frail. Their bodies, they're just not grubber bodies. They eat less. And I'm not talking about Aveda now. The way they're created, they're petite, and their nature is such. I dated some Chassidish like that. It was just their personality. We're talking about physical, even from pure physical properties. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And then there are people given a lot of strength, and they're so that's one thing. So when you have to deal with a less of a I'm talking about pure physical. Then let's add a little more. There are people born with aggression. Balit Taiva, warm-blooded, like he says in Tanya. There are people more Shcheda, more Levain. There's the people who are born with a lot of passion, hot-blooded, very excitable. Again, I'm talking natural now. I'm not talking about Aveda now. And a person like that is going to have more challenges because they get excited about things. People are more passive, more reflective by nature, are just less. And then there are people more edel, again, natural, more edel. I know there are families, you see a certain edelkeit from birth. You see in the whole family. And some families are very good up mention. So, I'm just giving some examples. Before Aveda, where Hashem will, in other words, say like this, that sometimes in the Neshama it's not so intense. The help that we'll get is that it won't have such a crass body and material part. And vice versa, somebody that has a greater soul may be given. It doesn't say for sure it has to be given, but may be given masonly. So he has more work to do. So in other words, sometimes like you see Kala Gadol Mechaver, you say Gadol Memenu. Person who's a greater person has a greater Yetzirah, greater challenges. Yeah, I think that's. I don't know if we need more explanation than that. I'm sure there's many ways it can manifest in 100 different ways. Just giving some examples. But the bottom line is to sum this up and then he's added the thing about the end of the generations. So now we have lower neshamas and lower bodies. So what is he saying? Does this mean that we have now less guf gasim also because we have lower neshamas? Mm-hmm. That's the question. So he says, "Gama gufim lechekim yesim." Doesn't say gasim yesim. That's the interesting thing. It doesn't say that. It also doesn't say dakim. So the interesting thing, I would say, based on what he's saying here, that generally speaking, if the neshamas are lower, God will give us less challenges, bodily challenges, which may be the case. He does say that the bodies are more, but bottom line, they're more, less bittul they have, they're less bittul. Not after that,
they're lacking soul.
Remember, we did have, it says in Alter Rebbe writes in Torah Eir, that tzaddikim were greater than, and Rishonim were greater than. So grubkeit was also greater than. When someone fell then, it was much worse. Because everything was stronger then. Avodah Zarah and other stuff like that. There was grubkeit then that didn't exist today. Today it's more whether it's ignorance or it's...
was very rampant then.
Yeah. So, but anyway, let's not talk about the third level of dysfunctionality. That's the final thing I want to say. So now we introduce that. Remember, that's where the example was the wood that's very wet, so it slips down. Or I said the drowning victim. So I think it's important to point out, he's not trying to say that the guf, the neshama, is a yesh on its own. If you remember, I gave the example in therapy or also in codependence, where somebody with good intentions wants to help someone else, but they're very abusive and they're very dysfunctional. And in their mind, they convince themselves I could help. And they will lower themselves, they'll come and they'll keep on giving and giving and giving to the point where they're trapped by that person's illness. They become an enabler, what they call it. They become part of the problem. It would be like a lifeguard, instead of strategizing and being a little less, not so overconfident, it would be, oh, you know what, I'm just going to save the person. I'm stronger than him. He's this, it's thrashing about. But when his intensity can cause them both to drown, which is really, Mamish is saying they both fall. The bottom line is, it's not, because you have to explain, the neshama we said is ayin. So how does neshama suddenly become a yesh? Well, some neshamas have a yesh. They're not containers. They're neshamas, even the greatest neshamas, if you recall, he said, even the highest neshamas, not like the sparks of Tayu that get concealed. They always maintain their divine nature. They're a part of the essence. What chapter was that? Right here, chapter 300. That never gets concealed. You can't conceal an etzem. It only conceals itself. Even in klippas atmeis, it doesn't completely get concealed. So mitamol is saying is a yesh. So 2 points you want to make. One is that even in the neshamas in ayin itself is more and less. Doesn't mean it's a yesh in the ayin. Relatively speaking, the neshamas that are, let's say, neshamas of tzaddikim, are much more intense neshamas. And the neshamas that don't have so much oid, but not. And the second thing with yesh is that a neshama can get trapped in the yesh mode. If the neshama, like, just like we said before, the opposite, that the body gets too sublimated, the neshama can get too immersed. Well, I mentioned about Adam Machava. They went into Gan Eden, one of the things in Kabbalah it says, they thought they could be Mevar Shalosh Dipsat Meis, and they couldn't. So a neshama can begin, and that's a yesh of the neshama. The neshama becomes overconfident. So there's the yesh of the neshama we spoke about before, when the neshama goes the other way. It wants to just get out of this place. I want to run. And that too is not appropriate because it's just busy with itself and doesn't work. Here's the opposite. The neshama says, oh, you know what? Let me immerse. I'm going to solve all the problems. I'm going to immerse in shlosh klipos atmeis. I'm just giving an example, and let's just save the world. And that too doesn't work. That's why it says a befrat if it's more yesh. So there's two things. The eir itself in the neshama can be lower. Koshken kishu b'chinas yesh. That parentheses. What does he mean by that? And number one is there's lower neshamas, and the lower neshamas should have to be more careful because they cannot deal with such challenges. So if God gave somebody a guf gas, okay, that's your challenge. That's what you have to do. But someone has a lower neshama. God didn't give them a guf gas. They shouldn't go ahead and try to create one or try to save one. Then there's b'chinas yesh. What I think he means is b'chinas yesh, first of all, relative to levels of ayin, and second of all, b'chinas yesh, where the neshama begins to become overconfident or over-involved, and gets trapped in the body's yeshus, and then of course nobody is saved. Okay, let's do the apiyah now.
No, based on this idea that he just mentioned there, anybody who has a more physical body, he has a higher neshama, basically.
Well, the truth is, everyone has greater challenges because you have and that is correct. Yeah, you could say that. I mean, there are probably exceptions in Tzad Gilgulim or Tikkunim that maybe there's a reason, but overall, yeah, absolutely.
No, one would think otherwise. I mean, the more edel he is, the more of a hechel neshama he has.
I agree. Look, you could look at that. Remember, there's also an edelkeit that people have through Aveda. You can see people who are like, they say that Nissim Memnov was, I don't know, but he was a very aggressive person. I rated this, and they say Pashat Shinui Hateva. And he saw him that he was a certain, they say that was not his natural being. He made himself that way. It wasn't like some people. So that's number one. And yeah, I know. Obviously, look, I could talk about Rabbeim or Tzaddikim. It's maybe a different level because Rabbeim, like a goof of a tzaddik, Chatchil is probably a very sublime goof, and not a grubble goof because he has a great neshama. That doesn't mean a tzaddik doesn't have great energy. He has that for sure, which could be used, after Shimish Peishana, so it can go the other way. But yeah, that's. I mean, in general, the Rebbe once wrote to us. I remember we asked the question. The Rebbe said, "The Torah doesn't come to be kavei masmeris. You have to be careful not to create any black and white rule." What he says. As a matter of fact, if you noticed, That's why I noticed. He says when it said when the neshama is lower, the hechrich sheyutin lo guvdak. But the other way, he didn't say when the neshama is higher, behechrich, you get a guvgas. He doesn't say the word behechrich. In other words, a lower neshama, you have to give it a lower one because it won't have the power. But the other one, he just says that when he gives, when it's a higher neshama, neisim lo guvgas. So I'm just, I noticed that. So it's clear. It's not that you can't make rules, but but generally speaking, first of all, Gola Godel Mechaver Yitzhak Godel. So you see a person's great Yitzhak, you can rest assured that he probably has a pretty strong neshama, or else he wouldn't have such temptations. Passion in general, passion, taiva, there's the koyach hamisava and there's the taiva. If you could strip away, forget about the object of the taiva. What is the taiva? The idea of having a lot of taiva for something.
It's coming from
Or
someone.
passion. What's coming from someone? Who's giving? It's not, why does the person have so much passion? Which immediately tells you that if you channel the passion, the person can do tremendous things. And you see this is my sadav. It's not that's a thing you see all the time. To me, this is a tremendous. I use it all the time. People I see like that. More you have to preempt. If you see someone, a student in yeshiva or something like that, has such power, you better give them something, because if not, it's a boiling pot, and it's going to explode. It's like a time bomb. You can't repress it. I remember.
Instead, they want to break them. That's it. Instead of channeling it.
By the way, when I was in yeshiva in Morristown, your father was our Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Heber, back in the 70s, and he once called me over. We had a conversation about this. And he said to me, I see you have a lot of passion. You're very excited. And you got to use it right because it can also destroy a lot. He didn't say it in a bad way. Actually, it was very moving. It wasn't like I did something. I made some trouble too. We all made trouble, But I remember he told me that. Your father had a good eye for these things. It was and I remember this for sure. And you can get into deep trouble because you have this thing, and it doesn't always expression, especially when you're young. You're reckless, and you can cause a lot of problems. I see it all the most addictive personalities in drugs or alcohol. The more addicted, you can rest assured, the more passionate it is. Or there's a lot of pain. There's some power there. There's no one gets, mediocre people don't get addicted. When you're passive, when something's strong, that means it's a strong. The question is it coming from strong energy, like, a lot of positive energy, or is it coming from a lot of pain and repressed energy? Because either way, it's going to explode. But that's that's the difference. That's why he says, like, to reprimand, you have to know when to reprimand somebody that's going to help break that. Sometimes what you need to do is elevate the person and bring them to a place where they realize their strengths, and then they achieve so much more. I mean, there's tremendous models you can create from this. I think this is like pretty revolutionary in my mind. So let's go continue. Let's finish the mimer. This is mimer 74. This is the conclusion now, the answers to the questions in the beginning of the mimer. So let's go quickly here. He asked all these questions in the beginning about Muhammad. According to above, we'll understand what it says, that you go out to more. You don't say go out, leave, only to someone that's dwelling inside. So what's this going out? The going out from inside, the exiting, this is the exiting from Atzilus to Biyah. So Atzilus is the inner world of Kedusha, of holiness, and Biyah is the outer world. The Atzilus ha lo yigur chara. The expression lo yigur chara, nothing ra, evil does not touch you. That's referring to Atzilus. Ve'en shaykh sham biru v'tikun kim b'Biyah. And you don't have any bitter v'tikun there. No, it's called elam hatikun. It repairs what happened in Toyo. But bitter v'tikun of ra, of refining, and there's nothing in ra, in Atzilus there's nothing to fix. It's already a fixed world. It's the perfect world. It's the perfect archetype, quintessential world where the balance is there. So where's bitter v'tikun take place? And beyond, that's where the war takes place. Because you go out, you have to go out from the pure environment into the battlefield. The bitter comes from the level of Atzilus. In other words, the power that you have to fight the battle and to win and to refine, that comes from the level of Atzilus. Just like the energy, the specific energy gives the power, is misakin, repairs, refines, radiates, and illuminates the container. See, meir, for example, the perfect word in Hebrew, where I don't think sometimes it means radiate, sometimes illuminate, sometimes even empower, because meir has so many elements to it. And for this, for Atzilus, to cause the bitter in the container, in Biyah, this you need to have the Yitziyah, the leaving of his galus, and the revelation of Atzilus, of the world of unity, the Biyah, to the world where the battle, so to speak, is taking place, the bitter. That's in the world. Now he's going to apply it to Neshamas. Same thing is with souls. The Chol HaNeshama Shosh L'Mekrenim B'Atzilus. All souls are rooted and sourced in Atzilus. Like we say in the morning, what's Tehera? Then we say Ata Barasa, Ata Yitzata, Ata Nafachtabi. So clearly you see the Neshama starts with Tehera, that's Atzilus, pure. Barasa, Yitzata, Nafachta is Biyah. Ata Neshama Bikirbi, it says, in Asiya, you need to have this particular protection. So what is that? Every soul stands or exists in the image Kama Malka Kadisha, before the Holy King. Basically, the divine image. Every soul, that's on its own, stands. It's
pure and holy. It's a
what's the
reflection.
emphasis?
It's a reflection on energy.
Right. Okay. Afterwards, Ata Barasa descends into Bria. You created it. Sheyardem Atzilus L'Biyah. It descends from Atzilus into Bria Tzirasiyah. In order to refine and to repair in Biyah. And specifically, in the refinement of the animal soul and all the lower things. Dvarim means the physical and material and created items of the world. It's a general term, Dvarim Tachtein, meaning not Dvarim Olyen. V'zeu, the B'Shabbos, this is what we say on Shabbos, Al Yetzei Ish Min Kemei, the Isser of Eruv Tchumen. On Shabbos it says, about Parashat B'Shalach, that a person should not leave Mekeme, from his place. What does Mekeme mean? So we learn from that we have a limit at 2,000 Amma, the 2,000 cubits. So person should not. So Shabbos you have to stay in your pnim, in your inner world. Your domain. Al Yetzish Mekeme. Do not leave your domain, right? The B'Shabbos beited osur. Shabbos, you're not allowed to do birurim. You're not allowed to refine. And halachically it means you're not allowed to separate, let's say, food items or other birurim. In Ruchnis it means that we don't, the battle of good and evil or the battle of refining the material world, we don't do on Shabbos. That's why we don't do business on Shabbos, we don't do work, money, and so on, because the birurim are not there. On the weekdays you're supposed to do that. This is from Zayar, and we say it as well. We say it in any of the Midas. Right. Chol Shultne Rugze, which means all the angry, the Gvuredik, all the angry governing forces, Shultne, all the powers, the forces that are angry of Regis. Omara Dedina, and the people who, the judge sitting in judgment, those that the judges. Kula Arkin, Visaver Mina. All of them get uprooted. Visaver Mina pass and are. And
Arkin means they flee. They flee. They run away. Visaber Mina, and they detach themselves.
Visaber Mina, and they remove. Right. They detach themselves. So on Shabbos you have Kedusha alone.
Evil forces detach themselves and they flee. They flee the Kedusha.
And then Shabbos, that is, you're on the level of Atzilus. Now, in the 10 spheres of Atzilus, we have 3 sections. You have Chabad, that's the intellect, Chagas, the emotions, and Hi are the secondary emotions. So Chacham bin Das Chesed Gvur Teferes Netzach Ched Yesod. The Seder Hamshachi the Betchil Nimshah B'chinas Nehi V'achar Kach Chagas. And the order of the transmission, it says that first transmit the level of Nehi, the lower level, and then a higher level of Chagas. Nehi is usually considered to be like Chagas, the higher emotions, more practical form of it. That's a Ched Yesod. Well, Kamokin Ha'aliyas Hein Gamkin B'Seder V'Adroga Tchila B'Nehi V'achar Kach B'Chagas. He's basically saying, in a Shabbos, for example, you have 3 meals in 3 sets. You have Maila Shabbata, you have Yom Shabbata, and you have Raiva de Raiva. So it says like Friday night, the Shabbos is more Shabbos from Menucha, from Melocha. So you're still sensing, you feel the tiredness of the week, the drain, week, and you're resting. The next day, you're ready more just Menucha alone. And it says, and the Shal Shuddis, Raiva de Raiva is the highest point of Faratztu. So there you experience Menucha Be'etzem. It's a higher state. So it all goes Mamatel Lamayla. So in Kabbalistic terminology means first you have the Hamshach of Nehi, then Chagas. The same thing he says, to make it Ha'aliyas, and Gamke B'Seid V'Adragit. Also the Aliyas, meaning the elevations that happen on Shabbos, not just the Hamshachin. The Hamshachin comes first the lower, then the higher. Also the Aliyah. First it's a Seder Adrag, it's in order, Tchila B'Nehi, V'achar B'Chagas. V'zeu the Aliyah is the Tchila, Tchilahu, B'chinas Heidah, Meidani Lefanach. And that's why we see also in davening. It's graded, it's a gradation. You don't just jump into Shemoneh Esrei. You begin with the lowest level. Heidah, acknowledging. Meidani Lefanach. Heidu LaHashem. When you acknowledge, you don't yet have a revelation. You just woke up. So I say, thank you. I acknowledge you for returning my soul to me. Haydu Hashem. So there's no yet revelation. So low. Bittul b'edah yesir be'etzem inyan habittul. Also, bittul b'edah yesir be'etzem inyan habittul. Kenei d'rakshem b'zagili e. Bittul b'edah yesir be'etzem inyan habittul. I think he's saying the bittul of edah is deeper than regular bittul. But how do you read that?
I think it's a mem instead of a base. It's a me'etzem inyan habittul.
Think so?
Possibly.
Bittul b'edah yesir be'etzem inyan habittul. Well, you could say bittul b'edah yesir be'etzem inyan habittul. It's even a deeper bittul. Tonight, as it's not actually, but it still doesn't mean there's revelation.
Or the mem goes to the inyan. Bittul b'edah yesir be'etzem. It's more of a yesir, no? Me'inyan habittul.
I would probably not touch it. I would say probably a bittul be'edah yesir be'etzem inyan habittul. And etzem inyan habittul be'edah is more. No, it's like that. If you let's say reverse it, be'etzem inyan habittul be'edah is yesir. Something like that. Actually, but okay, bottom line, but it doesn't have Gilead. That's parentheses. Now you elevate. The Psukkah de Zimre, who is born as B'Savas Yeshmai. Now you're already contemplating on the creation of Yeshmai, something from nothing. Or Bitla Nevroim. And the sublimation or the non-existence or the whatever, the insignificance of Nevroim, of the world, of the creations. Baruch Sha'amar v'haya elam. After Haydu, we said Baruch Sha'amar. Blessed is the one that said and created the world. Talking about the world. God l'adonai v'rav keach. How great is our master? Great, the immense power he has. Halos Hashem min hashamayim. You're praising God from heaven. In other words, you're talking now about it's already Giluim. You're talking about how God manifests in our world. It's not just I acknowledge, give me back my life. So this causes an excitement and emotions, in the emotions. And this causes an engraving. It chips. It's like a chipping of the outside of the animal soul. It starts chipping away at it. So Hidah is just acknowledgement, but you're not changed anything. Now when you start bringing in thinking about Hashem and God created the world and how He created it and the world is really non-existent, you're beginning to chip away. So it's like chipping or chiseling away, right, chiseling. But the animals. Then you come to the Bichsa Krishma, which is after Bichsa Pesukah the Zimra. Bichsa Yetzer bittul the Srafim. Now you're going higher. We're going now the bittul of the Srafim, the angels. Srafim ve'fanim shapel bittul pnimi b'nefesh habamis. Srafim ve'fani hakedesh. Actually, Srafim is the malachim of Bria. Ve'fanim are the malachim of Asiya, actually. Now Srafim is Bria. Chayes hakedesh is Bria, is Yitzira, and Ve'fanim is Asiya. Okay, so he says now when you start talking about their bittul, that is bonus causes a deeper, an inner bittul, an inner sublimation of the animal soul, not just chiseling away the outsides, chipping away. Because the animal soul is rooted in the srafim in that level. So when it senses their bittul, how they burn up and they are they're completely consumed.
He comes from them. That's the
From the merkava, sheh sheba merkava. Yeah. So therefore, that causes a deeper bittul. So we move now from Nihi. Nihi is the Hidah. Chagas is already emotions, espoused amidas that come through Pesukah the Zimra. And Bichus Yetzer is a deeper bittul in that. And now he's coming to Meichem, to Chabad. So we got Nihi, Chagas in the Aved. In Krishma, you come to Meichem, to the mind, because now you're Mizbonus, now is already the contemplation.
This is the Aliyah.
Shema Yisrael. Yeah, from below up. Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem. Ubeshvenesre, Chins Reishi Magia Shemaim. Remember, Tefillah is Sulam Mutzav, so it's a ladder that has 4 rungs. Okay, 4 rungs go from the earth. So Mutzav Arza, Reishi Magia Shemaim. It's a ladder that's standing on earth, which means down here below.
The 4 sections of
and we climb. So the 4 is, generally speaking, he's saying the 4 here. Sometimes there's different ways. Sometimes it's Birchas HaShachar. Let's say Moeda Ani is 1, Pesukah Zimra is 2, Shema, Birchas Krishma and Shema is 3, and Shemines is 4. But sometimes it's a little structured different. Like here, it would be more like Birchas HaShachar, meaning Moeda Ani is 1, Pesukah Zimra is 2, is emotions. Birchas Yetzer is encompassed as like another dimension, I guess, in Pesukah Zimra, at the end of it. So that's.
He started from Pesukah Zimra. The Hidah was before that.
The Hidah was before. So Nihi. Okay.
The Hidah is before the end.
Okay. So Nihi is Pesukah Zimra and the Yetzer. Shema is. No, that's good. That's 4. Hidah, Pesukah Zimra, Shema, Shema.
No, Pesukah Zimra, the Birchas Shema.
No, but here Birchas Shema, Yetzer is considered to be part of. It's not Meichem yet. It's still Midas.
He says Krishma.
Krishma b'chinas hameichem. No. Hidah is Nihi. Pesukah Zimra and Yetzer is Midas. Bittul Pchsteni and Bittul Pnimi. That's what he's saying, basically. And Shema is Meichem.
Oh, okay.
And Shemnesa is Reisha Magia Shemayim. Now its head has, the top of the ladder reaches to heaven. Shemagila Madriga Yesel Yena. It reaches to the highest, the ultimate highest, the apex, the zenith. As we shall discuss all this later. Which means that the Aveda, the service, is in an organized fashion. Remember, we spoke about Shuvah is not organized. When a person just has an awakening and it's not organized, and there's no cheshbon, it doesn't affect the first problem, first dysfunction. So here it's going to say the Vadrag is an organized way, both from the Nefesh Elikis, from the divine soul, and in the refinement and sublimation of the divine animal soul. And this is the meaning that you go out to war, that you go out from inside. It's a general reference. It's a reference to the general descent of the soul from the inner world of Atzilus that has to go down below into the beyond, to the lower worlds. So the whole verse is referring to the whole theme we're discussing in this Maimorim. And its way it goes down, and its service is in such a way that it has a relationship connected to the body and the animal soul to refine them and to repair them. And then he says, V'emrei, and then that what he says, the continuing verse, that Hashem will give them to you, meaning go out to war, and he will give the enemy to you in your hands. Hu habittul the nefesh habamis. That's referring to the sublimation of the animal soul. Ve'ema v'nosne, and it says the word v'nosne loshon avtocha, promise. He will give it to you. It's not something that you will achieve on your own. He'll give it to you. That means mamash m'pnei shezel mamayla. Remember we spoke about that, which comes from above. V'nasane, huh?
V'nasane.
Okay, I said v'nasane be'yadecha. Shalom kecha be'yadecha. U'be'emes beiza inyonim t'chitzeitzil l'mechama. And the truth is, both these things, going out to war, the truth is, both these things, going out to the war, which is the descent of the animal soul, to go from transcendence to existence, and the sublimation of the animal soul, to go from existence to transcendence, truth, both are from above. In other words, it's not just that the conquest comes from above, but also the actual thing comes from above. Like we discussed earlier, that in truth, the tikkun b'chlal, the general repair, is from above. That's the hanachas atmuse, the bittul that we have to the divine. But the details of the service, that comes. In other words, you don't decide that your soul is going to come down to earth. That too is from above. Because Muhammad means God sends you from Atzilus into Biyah. And then V'nasane B'yadecha gives you also the power to sublimate the Nefesh Habamis. So it all comes from the bittul that comes from above. But we have to show up and we have to do our part. As I said, it's a mediation of two worlds here. So it's not just God is doing it for us. That's why I had a long, before you came, I had a long discussion about this, that it's within the containers and in our parameters. So it's between us. It's an interface here. Because you could say it's all from above. What do you need us for altogether? Because then it's not. It has to be something we own, something we interface with godliness.
But even in a war, like it's decided where you're going to be in the war, what the kalim you're going to use, if you're going to be infantry or the air force, whatever. You just have to be there to. Everything else is decided for you. You just have to show up.
Yeah. And afterwards it says v'shavisa shivye, that you will take hostages, you will conquer your captives. Right? Hu hayisrin shenasa de'aveda. This already is the advantage, the profit, so to speak, that comes through the work. V'uschara neshama. This is really the reward of the soul, like I said, avodehem. Remember, we saw avodehem in the beginning of chapter Shin Beis. Actually, no, I said it a little later. Yeah, it's a little. Mitzvahs and mitzvahs says that Bnei Yisrael avodim is the work, and avodehem is the Yiri Allah that comes afterwards. So that's already the Shavisa Shivye. This is the meaning of going out to war. The ultimate purpose, there should be a refinement and repair of the animal soul. For this, there needs to be the yitzir, the leaving of the divine soul from inside, from Atzilus, and its exiting out and leaving should be in a way that there should be refinement. That's the bittul of the animal soul. And through this, you will take captives, conquer, captive. That's the advantage, the profit that comes out of this. It's interesting that a lot of these summaries, these ends, he repeats the verse several times, almost saying the same thing.
No, if you have taken captives, you're taking from the other side towards
Right.
your side. You're increasing your.
Exactly. So let's read the Kitzur. The Tikkun Anal Yochel Yisai Deish Tatus B'derech Kabbalah Sel. And this repair of the Neshama and Guf repairing, meeting each other, Yochel can be through our efforts in a form of Kabbalah Sel, where our efforts that we submit to the higher will. It's interesting, this was the parentheses, but he now turned it into the actual kitzur. The parentheses has become the primary element of this Very interesting. Okay.
But
And what's the status?
Could it be that he added the parentheses later in the prim?
No, that wouldn't make sense. No, the Kitzur Kursurim came later.
Yeah, but also the parentheses that are in the prim is not shaykhs. That's why they're in parentheses.
No, it is. It's shaykhs that he added the parentheses later. Yeah, absolutely, of course.
Maybe
it could be added parentheses then when he added the Kitzur.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. The parentheses becomes now the Kitzur is the parentheses.
When you add the kitzur, it makes
yeah, but that means that. But so why did he make it parentheses? Could have made it not parentheses. Whatever. Okay, spirituals. And what's the ishtadlus in B'yisashvus? No, in the concentration, focusing. And the matters that can be comprehended. What's the ishtadlus? What's the body's efforts? Lishbir achumris. Either to break its crassness, or the sameach nafshei b'teira, depending on which side. Either to break it so it becomes a container, or if its container is too porous, too weak, is to sameach nafshei, to rejoice his soul in Teira. The truth is, it comes from above. That this power comes from above, that the soul should go from ayin liyesh, from transcendence to existence, and the body from yesh to ayin. By madrega hagimel, okay. Interesting. He starts with the ishtadlus, but he goes back that the emes is the first lines of the chapter. Look at this now. The emes and mamayla, you see. So the parentheses became now the beginning of the summary. The first line of the chapter became the next line. Okay, fine. It's a summary, so you can summarize it different ways, but it's interesting how it goes. Vamadrega hagimel. And the third type of dysfunctionality, hushaguf gazbi, that the body is excessively crass. And the neshama is a diminished transcendence. That was also in the parentheses. And for sure, when it's on the level of yesh, the oza yedid b'yeser, and that's when it descends, excessively descends.
Very good.
Yeah. Like we see the murgish b'yeser says, like b'yesh leimer, he said that was when there's when the love and awe is excessively sensed and felt. K'shaguf and avzeramas would be b'yesh b'yeser. So the aviyira is b'murgish b'yeser. It's excessively sensed, and the guf and nefesh habam is the the body and animal soul are in there and excessively self-oriented. So then they don't become misbatel, they don't become sublimated, and adrab, on the contrary, they fall, God forbid. The
mucha, this is a new word, right?
Yeah,
Didn't say that.
he said before. And the repair of a lower soul, which is like Mashiach, is by giving it a more refined body. And the shama that is more transcendent, they give a crass body. Sheyesh by mekol mokum bittul hayesh. It's also because it has at least bittul hayesh.
It versus what? They don't give it something else.
No, in other words, what he's saying that the goof. Oh no! What he's trying to say is, if it's a guf gas that's too powerful, it'll overwhelm even a great neshama. So the guf gas has to have in it. Remember, he said, I told you before the parentheses. It has to have something, or he's just qualifying it. If it's just a pure guf gas and it's no keli, you can have yourself a big problem, even for a great neshama. Okay.
Like a guf of behemoth doesn't have a bittul hayesh. Only a guf of adam.
This is kiseitze. You shall leave. The second of Shabbat, the descent, the exit of the soul from within to repair the animal soul. And this service should be organized in gradation, staged. And Hashem will give it in your hand. This is the sublimation of the animal soul and the way of lavtacha, promise, meaning coming from above. And with this, we conclude chapter 303, pages 515 through 517, and concluded Maimer discourse number 74. And the next chapter will be discourse number 75, chapter 304. show you how to do this again.